we have here Madam Marianne Nazareth with us.
Hi.
Hello, ma'am. Actually, how did you get into the field of journalism, ma'am? Where did you get started?
Well, I've always enjoyed writing, and I didn't specifically look only at journalism. My life has taken different paths. I was always liked writing all styles of writing, not specifically journalism. And journalism in my time was really not taught in college as such. There were no real journalism schools in Bangalore. So what had happened was I used to freelance with various papers, and then I ran my ad agencies simultaneously. But I used to really enjoy writing, and I like seeing my byline in the newspapers, just like any other journalist. But it was not so easy. It took a little time because essay writing is completely different from journalism. And so it did take a lot of rejects. It did take me some time to understand the finer nuances. And it was really only when I worked with a writer in California when I went in Berkeley, who told me that an essay is not journalism. You have to really write it as you see it. And that's where I started off.
What particular skill set is required in that field?
For a journalist, you basically have to look at being very clear thinking. And I, at the moment, now teach, I'm adjunct faculty in St. Joseph's College of Media Studies, postgraduate students. And I teach them that you have to be very blinkered. You look at, when you have an idea in your mind, you don't jump all over the place. You go just like a horse would go in a, pulling a tonga, say, and he has this blinkers on his eyes, and he just looks straight at the road ahead of him. And that's exactly how you do your stories. You are blinkered, you think exactly what your goal is, what you're trying to say, and the 5 W's and an H is very important.
So the major opportunities and challenges you had?
The opportunities didn't just come my way. I had to work towards making it happen. So essentially, I ran my ad agency, but yes, I started writing. And then I found that when I was doing a lot of stories on Bangalore as such, there were a lot of readers who enjoyed my work and got back to the management. And when the management was happy and my bylines began to get recognized was when I realized where my forte was and where my strengths lie. So nothing just falls in your lap. I always say there's never a free lunch. You always have to work towards a goal and you have to try and make it happen. Sometimes it does and sometimes it doesn't. Of course, today students have education which helps them and guides them, like I help my students to get published. So I will edit their stories in such a way that it's perfect for the paper. Since I was an assistant editor finally when I resigned. So basically, I don't say that they were just opportunities like that. I made them happen.
Would you name a few of your remarkable works?
Well,
the very first, the earliest works.
The early ones, I used to do a lot of heritage of Bangalore, talk about all the old buildings which were up in Bangalore. And so people remembered me for that because I would do a lot of research on the particular places, statues, the old buildings. So a lot of people remember me for that. And then slowly I worked. I do all sorts. I mean, a journalist cannot choose at the time when you're in a newspaper. So I do everything from fashion to health to anything, whatever was asked of me. Yeah.
And about your interest in music now?
My interest in music basically has come because we are Goans, and Goans are known for their food and their drink and their enjoyment of life, their susegad attitudes. And as far as my father was concerned, we had to have a degree in music. We had to also learn certain things in life like cooking and stitching and sewing. That's what he felt was important for us girls. But he never specified any roles. He left us to decide what we wanted to do. So my music, I did right up to my licentiate with the Trinity College of Music, London. I did use it a lot. I still use it. I have a piano at home. We pound the piano every now and again and we sing. And that's basically how Goans are. We love music and food in our lives.
What did you want to become, ma'am, as a child?
I never had any dreams. Actually, Dad had his dream of me being a doctor, but I think I broke that mold very fast because I disliked the sight of blood, and there was no question about it. But it was slowly that he realized that I was very good at writing, so he encouraged that. So I really say that it was from my background, from my family, from my parents' influence. We never got regular toys as gifts for Christmas and for our birthdays. We got books. I still have the collections of books that we had. And there were a lot of different types of writers. And my mom, when she was 50, she did a master's in literature. So my family never believed that there was a cutoff age for study and education. And I think it's a lot of this encouragement to read which finally made me go towards writing in such a big way.
How do you feel about the opportunities for women in this field, ma'am?
Today the opportunities are much more. Women are coming out of large institutions with degrees, armed with degrees. So they're quite clear about what they want. Some of my students have gotten to CNN, IBN straight, immediately after their masters. Some have gotten to, where I was in the Deccan Herald. There are several in the Times of India. They get into newspapers. There is this Kashmiri girl who said, "Ma'am, I'll never get into a newspaper with the problems happening in Kashmir." And she is in a Kashmiri newspaper today, in Kashmir itself. So there are huge opportunities, not just only for men, but also for women journalists across the world, yes.
Do you think our editorials are gender justified, ma'am?
That is a rhetorical question, and I smile with that because today women will pound an editor if he writes against them. So an editor has to be very careful about the kind of editorials he writes. And if you read the recent editorials on the rape issue which had happened and which continue to happen, and all the, whatever's happening against women in India, editors have to be a little careful about gender and the way they write it, because women are today not just going to sit back and take whatever an editor decides is his macho opinion. They will fight back.
What was your experience as a woman journalist?
Well, initially the first time round I was with the Metro desk. It was great fun because I suppose I was in charge, so it was fun. I had all these youngsters who were below me, so it was interesting. You must remember, I joined the newspaper after I finished with my advertising agency. So I had a lot of experience already with advertising and with freelance journalism. My second round, that was after I came back for my masters, I did an Erasmus Mundus Masters in Journalism in Europe, and that was from 2006 to 2008. And when I came back, they gave me a very senior position. I handled the edit and op-ed pages, but very, very strangely, in spite of having a cabin and being paid a salary which was equivalent to the others, I was treated like a clerk there. I was asked to clean up all the stories, and I was asked to just sit till the page was signed. Well, that was my experience. And after about 10 months, I felt I just couldn't take it anymore. I didn't want to stay on. I resigned, primarily because I had a degree backing which I thought I could use with young journalists instead of wasting my time doing clerical jobs in the newspaper, and that's why I quit. So definitely a woman still is not equivalent to a man in a newspaper office.
Do you recommend this job for women, ma'am? Would you?
Sure, I do. I always do. I always tell journalists, there's plenty out there if you're good at your job, just like any other job. I have Shailaja Verma, who has just joined CNN IBN. She tells me they take advantage and they haven't been paying her for the last 1 year. But I tell her to hang in there, and you know, finally when they see her quality, obviously they will employ her. I have another girl, Nikita Sengupta, who has just gotten to Deccan Herald. There are opportunities not only for women. I have a lot of my men students as well who have gotten as photojournalists now in a big way. So the opportunities are plenty.
Why did you quit mainstreaming, ma'am?
Why did I quit mainstream media? Basically because whenever I went out to a conference, I was told by my editor, just remember, you have to go with the policy of the newspaper. It's not your voice. And after a while, especially when you're covering things like I did, climate change, and things like that, where there is so much of infighting between nations, I somehow felt my voice would also I would like to have it out. And that's why I quit mainstream. Not for any other reason. I wanted my voice. It was time for me to be heard rather than the newspaper itself.
What inspired you to get into novels, ma'am?
Into a novel, okay. Now that's the romantic side of me, I suppose, where I am very creative as far as the language is concerned. And it's not that I was born with a command. You can work at a command. So even till today, I study one word a day. I believe it's important to learn and increase your vocabulary, because if you are being paid for your language and for your story, then you've got to earn what you write. So that's how it started. And basically my first little book was for children, and they were children's stories, The One-Eyed Ogre and Other Stories, which was published in 2012. And in that book, it started with just stories which I had published in the Deccan Herald. We collated 20 of them together and published them. But my novel is totally about Goa, the little village of Goa. It's not about what the whole world knows is Goa. It's really that it's a small little place with people who have culture, people who have background. They're not just only about food and drink and dancing, but there's a lot more to Goa, and that's what started me on my novel. I felt that Goa was not getting a fair deal. In the media, it was being made out into a place where people can just run wild, do whatever they want. There were no rules, and that's what upset me, because as a Goan, with my background, I know there's a lot more to Goa than what is being portrayed in the media.
What drove you towards environmental studies and gender equality studies?
Actually, it was in 2006 when I was doing my master's in Europe. I was in Denmark at the time, and the people in charge of us sent us this application and said, apply. There is a conference being held in the United Nations in New York. You have to write a piece on the environment and apply for it. It was just like any other, it was like an exam. They were going to check how you wrote, what you wrote on. And so I sent my story, and I was quite surprised to have been selected. They paid for my airfare to New York, and I went to the United Nations for the first time. It was an amazing experience. And that was where I learned all about climate change and what was happening with our planet. And with the background that I had and the interests which my dad did as far as nature and species, birds, animals, things which Dad taught us as we were children, plus this kind of made me decide, okay, this is the way I'd like to. and opportunities started opening for me ever since I went for that one conference. After that, I became a fellow with the UNFCCC, which is the United Nations arm, and that's how I started going out for these conferences.
Mention a few of your remarkable works, ma'am, which got selected.
Well, when I was going to the UNFCCC, it was mainly on climate change. So I was focusing on what was happening to our planet and what was happening to India specific. How would climate change affect us in India regarding with rainfall patterns, how we should go into renewable energies, how we need to look at rainwater harvesting, how we need to in our cities look at solar heating rather than the regular, how to cut back on our carbon emissions. Those are the kind of stories which I started writing and today I'm known for.
Ma'am, you've been a journalist, you've been an academician, you've been a researcher, and what are you doing it for, ma'am? What's your vision?
Well, at the moment, I just use whatever opportunities I get. Basically, I don't know whether it's the way I am as a person. I somehow feel that if I go out to a conference, I don't just give one story. I normally can write 4 or 5 stories. I look at all angles. I look at which are the different areas I can cover. And I feel we as the media, especially in the environment, can educate people, all the masses who read us. And that's my aim. I feel really happy that, personally, I feel that we pounded about rainwater harvesting in Karnataka. And today it's a policy decision. The government has made it mandatory. Every house has to rainwater harvest. We also made a big noise, the environment journalists, about solar. And now every home is given a subsidy if you take solar. And now with our recent problem that we've had with garbage, we wrote lots of stories about how we need to segregate our garbage, how we don't throw all the garbage together, how you segregate your wet waste and compost it, how each home can compost it. And I feel that's my aim today. If I can make our country a little better, realize that it's in our hands and not wait for the government to do whatever, I think that's finally my aim. If we can help each of us to clean up our own country and less pollution all round, it will be a much healthier world.
How do you feel about freelancing, ma'am?
Freelancing, only if you are financially stable can you freelance. So I'm comfortable at a comfortable stage of my life where my 2 bigger sons are now on their own. I just have one at home who has just begun to work. So freelancing is you're not really sure of what you get at the end of the month. And also you must freelance only if your byline is something that is credible and people know it. So as far as freelancing, establish your byline. That's what I tell all young journalists. Establish your byline, and once it's established, then anyone will take you. But before that, freelancing can be very dicey, because if you have a topic which an editor wants, and if it's a known byline who's willing to write, they would prefer the known byline to you. And so at the moment, yes, I freelance a lot for the Hindu. I freelance for a lot of online journals. There's a lot of capacities across the world now online. You can get up to £100 a story. You can get up to $250 also for stories which I write for outside. But that's not every month. So a freelancer is a very precarious situation. You're not really sure about what you're going to take home at the end of the day. So what I'm saying is, if you are absolutely stable, yes, freelance. And if your byline is known. But before that, don't even try it.
Speaking of research, ma'am, you've been doing a paper on man versus elephant conflict. Can you please brief on that?
When I was asked whether I would like to do a PhD on this particular topic, human versus elephant conflict, it was something that was very close to my heart because I had just seen a news clip on the TV where the focus was on the elephant, and the elephant was killing a man. That was all they were focusing on. They never focused on why that happened with the elephant. How did the elephant reach that particular stage? And then I realized all that the media does is basically sensationalize any topic, and then it makes the media. And so that is why I thought, let me do my PhD on this, how important it is for the media to be sensitized as far as this particular issue is concerned, and then and only then can we solve the problem. If the media is just only going to focus on the violence and the demonization of the animal, it's really not going to work, it's just going to get worse. Because elephants are huge and they can attack back again. So it's about time that we thought of them as well and not just ourselves. So that's why I'm doing the PhD. My PhD is not on the elephant per se, but it's on how the media covers the conflict. And that's where I'm working on the final findings of that.
Would you brief on your blogging time?
Well, it was several years ago when I started my own personal blog. But today, blogging has become very huge. I go to conferences across the world and blog. I went for an international transport conference to Berlin, to Turin, and this year to Dublin, where I blog on various aspects of the conference. And these are not like the little blogs that we have, which are not credible. These are blogs where regular professional journalists are employed, and you blog on a daily basis of one aspect of the conference. So these are called official blogs, and they are very huge. Today it's growing. People prefer reading a blog to a regular newspaper, especially in Europe. And I also work for a travel portal which has a blog, but again, they use professional journalists like me to write for them on a regular basis, on a monthly basis. And I write 4 stories a month on various places. But then again, you must remember my research capabilities come in. So academics are important also for a journalist. Unless you are a researcher, unless you have a background of academics, you will not be able to get the depth in your stories. And you will not get enough of information even for your blog. So I feel that's what's important. Researching is important for anybody who writes. And blogging is definitely going very far today. Not personal blogs, as I repeat, but the credible blogs which go with every site and every published house, that is, every publishing house has their own blog.
Would you comment on your latest book now?
Above the rice fields of Pilon. Well, it started off essentially again, I have to say, my parents, my dad in particular, because my dad is from Pilon. Pilon is a tiny little village in Goa. It is in the heart of a huge number of rice fields. And so every holiday we went back there, and every holiday we enjoyed spending time in the house with all the very, very, basic necessities we had. There was nothing fancy. It was just a small little village house, which my grandfather had done up, and my great-grandfather, and it's like got 300 years of history behind it. So my dad felt right about it. It's a marvelous experience. How many people in the world really know about our Goan, customs of jumping in the well for St. John the Baptist's feast? There's nobody who really knows about these things. But our people on St. John the Baptist's feast dive into wells to take out bottles of Feni. Okay? Then we also have a lot of different customs in our village where we have huge festivals, huge feasts of food, and these big ice sculptures which are put on the tables. So you could say there's a fusion of Portuguese and Goan there. There's a lot of Portuguese and Goan, A lot of my relatives in Goa still speak Portuguese, but we are very proudly Indian. And like my dad, it was quite difficult because in 61 when Goa was liberated, he was part of that liberation. So quite a lot of that has gone into my novel, yes. And yet it has got the dreaminess of Goa. So I would like you to read it if you do get an opportunity.
You sure will, ma'am.
Yeah.
Sure. Can you suggest some ways a student could obtain the necessary experience?
I always believe more than academics, hands-on is where you learn. And so as many fellowships and conferences that you go for, every single one exposes you to something different. I know every single place I go to, you get tired after a while. I mean, it's the same old visas and the same old problems. But the only reason why I still like to go is because every single conference you learn so many new things. Like this time in Dublin, I learned all about fracking. Now, how many of us in India really know what fracking is about? But fracking is something which every environment journalist needs to learn about. And so that's what I'm trying to talk about. You know, I say that when you go out to these conferences, it opens your minds out to so many different possibilities and so many different subjects which you would never have heard of if you were only within India. When you go out, open your mind to the country, open your mind to their food, and open your mind to everything. And that is an experience in yourself, and that is what students need. And journalism students have the world at their feet today. There are so many opportunities. The British Council has, the British Council especially gives very nice short courses. And there are lots of opportunities. They just have to look on the net. I mean, finally this master's which I did was because I was a journalist. They spent 42,000 euros on me. So obviously there was a reason for that. So I personally feel you want experience, you got to move out of India, look at other horizons, not to go away. Go away, open your mind and come back. Never go away, because basically our country needs to develop finally. And it's us journalists who are educated who can do that.
It's been a pleasure being with you, ma'am. Thanks a lot.
Thank you, it was very enjoyable.